and live on YouTube. And as soon as Facebook finishes thinking about it, we are live on Facebook. Hi, everybody. Paul Lathrop, the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. We're going to be recording episode 572 of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Here in just a minute, we're going through our final show prep for the recording. And everybody on my team ready to go?
Yep.
All right, Jim. Yes. What's going to happen? You're going to be covered up by a logo for the first segment. That's where we go through our personal news, and then when we go to your interview, in the break that leads to your interview, I'm going to pop you back in. So. Okay. I'm going to go box 6. And there we go. All right. Everybody on my team ready for me to hit the magic buttons?
Do it.
Yeah, not the plastic ones, just the magic ones.
All right. Okay. Here we go. Recording in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro-Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're recording this one on Monday, January the 4th, 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Amy Dillon, and on tonight's show, we talk with former law enforcement officer Jim Kuzak about his journey to shooting for Team Glock.
I'm Charlie Cook, and we talk about the COVID-19 relief federal spending bill signed into law by President Trump.
I'm Rob Morris, and we'll talk about a defensive gun use where a woman was attacked by 4 teenagers.
I'm Robin Sandoval, and we'll talk about the important election in Georgia tomorrow. So climb aboard. Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 572 of the Polite Society podcast, presented by the Second Amendment Foundation, starts right now. Hey everybody, another Monday, another episode of the Polite Society podcast. We're going to start off as we usually do by kicking it over to my good friend Rob and find out what the heck's he's been up to since the last time we had him on the air.
Hey, Paul. I was on Bill Frady's Lock and Load radio show just a little bit ago. He's been, like most radio hosts, he was subbing for another station. I had the fun of inviting him back to his own show. I was the first voice of the year, so I got to do that. I got to record another episode of Self-Defense Gun Stories. I dry practiced, carried concealed. Life's pretty usual down here. One of the family members had COVID, so I'm trying to limit my contact with people who might be at risk. Amy, what have you been up to?
Well, I drove to, Dave and I drove to Alabama to visit some of his family over the holidays, and we had a good time. While we were there, I got a chance to spend some time and shoot at CMP Talladega Marksmanship Park, and they have a range or multiple distances, so I had a great time. It was very fun. I'm currently back in Georgia, and I'll be casting my vote tomorrow for the Senate race. So,
thank you.
Robin, what's going on with you?
This week has been, it sounds silly, but now that we're kicking off the first of the year, the past week I've been cleaning my garage, which has been a whole week-long undertaking of getting all of my gear and equipment out of boxes, out of range bags. I had stuff stuffed into different bags, different places, so it was a huge undertaking, and I'm really excited to have that for the year because I want to. My goal is to do some 3-gun matches. So I'm going to get from behind the computer and onto the range. I'm really excited about that. So I wanted to make sure I had inventory of all of my stuff. So that's what I've spent my time doing. I was also visiting on the Answer radio in San Diego last night, talking about the DC project and a lot of the things going on. And that's pretty much it with me. Charlie, what's up with you?
Thanks. I have carried every day, even on the day when I did not leave my house. Right? Because it's Pogo, right? I got my pants on. It might have been my, wet pants and pajama bottoms, but they're still pants. I've taught a Utah class this past week, and last week I was down in Delaware, and I purchased a shotgun while I was out of my home state, which is something that I wanted to cross off my list as a gun instructor that I wanted to do. So that was pretty cool. How about you, Paul?
Well, for me, it's been, well, of course, we all know this is New Year's happened this past weekend. And for me, it was a chance to just spend a little bit of time with my sweetheart. I got a lot of work done with some emailing, getting caught up on getting things set up for the weekly bullet and the daily bullet, and got a lot of other things accomplished for that. But mainly this past weekend, I spent a lot of time with Susan and just enjoyed the heck out of that. I also, one of the side gigs I do, and this pertains to nothing gun related, but it was a nearly heart attack inducing moment. Everybody knows that I do the daily and the weekly bullets for the SAF, and I had just recorded a weekly bullet with Amanda Suffolcool, and the software I use has different sets for each different show I do, and so when I finish, I do what I do all the time. I clicked save, and a little pop-up notice came up, and I'm so used to that pop-up notice, I really didn't look at it. I just clicked OK, and it said, "Are you sure?" I'm so used to it, I just clicked OK. And I completely erased the set that I was going to be using next in 90 minutes, which was the set for Eye on the Target radio. A set that had took me about 20 hours to create from scratch. And oh, by the way, at that time, I had 90 minutes to have it ready so she could go on the air. I did it. It was rough, but it was successful. And I got most of what I'd erased replaced in the 90 minutes it took us to get her on the air. So I tell you what, though, folks, that moment for me was every bit as scary as that car just hit an embankment and slid in front of me and I'm going to hit it. That was every bit as scary from a professional point of view. So that was my heart attack for the week. Let's see, training classes. I got a training class I want to plug before we go to break. Coming up June 3rd through the 6th is Masada Yub Group coming up to Sioux Falls. Masada Yub is coming up to teach the class. I got confirmation this week that one of our staff members who isn't on the air tonight is going to be coming up and going to be calling the range part of the class so that Mass can go around and give coaching. Tracy is going to be coming up, and so if you've ever wanted to train with Tracy Thronberg, get a hold of Susan. Susan at politicsandguns.com. Tracy's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Mass is going to be there. Gail Pepin, of course, will be there. Looking for some really, really great training coming up this summer. If you're worried about COVID, if you're worried about, oh my God, we're all in New York State, we're under lockdown. We can't move. In California, we're under lockdown. We can't move. South Dakota's never had one, and I don't anticipate us having one. Come on over. And if you're going to be doing some gun training, we might even convince you to stay here for a while. So anyway,
You guys
what
have
else?
those COVID-free signs in South Dakota, right?
What's that?
You have the COVID-free signs, like no COVID zone signs?
Yes, exactly. Yes, and the COVID obeys.
Oh, it's
Shocking.
amazing.
So it's just the same. For me, it's just the same as you go to sit down, you go into a restaurant, you wear your mask when you go into the restaurant, and then you sit down, you can take the mask off because the COVID doesn't get below this level right here. So
Exactly. I'm so glad you explained that.
right.
Follow the science, right?
Exactly. Before we do take off to break, I want to remind everybody, go ahead and check out the Self-Defense Radio Network. All your pro-freedom podcasts in one place. As you can see, we're getting more and more shows on the network all the time. Newly added is the Get Off My Lawn podcast by the Sand Hill Shooter. We've also got Guns Guide to Liberals, Unload and Show Clear. Of course, Eye on the Target Radio. Lots of great shows. Go check them all out by pointing your browser at sdrn.us. Right now, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we've got our interview with Jim Kuzak, and we'll do that right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Givens, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by Network President Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
And welcome back to the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We have our interview segment next, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest tonight, former law enforcement officer Jim Kuzak. And I'm going to go ahead and just read a little bit from his bio on his website, just so I don't miss anything. On April 4th, 2011, Officer James Kuzak Jr. of the City of Clairton Police Department, Pennsylvania, was ambushed responding to a home invasion. He was shot 5 times and subsequently paralyzed from the waist down. At the time of the shooting, Jim had been an 18-year veteran officer in Washington County, Pennsylvania, serving 9 years as a narcotics detective for the Washington County District Attorney's Office, a certified defense tactics instructor through PPCT, and the FBI Defensive Tactics Program. He was also featured in the documentary Heroes Behind the Badge, Sacrifice and Survival. Jim is currently a sponsored shooter for Team Glock, serving as an ambassador for the Glock brand. He's also a motivational speaker to numerous police academy and dispatcher classes, as well as civilian groups. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Oh.
Works better when you turn it on?
Or when the host doesn't mute him.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim. Go ahead, man.
That's quite all right. No, thank you for having me on the show. I've been anxiously awaiting.
Well, we're glad to have you on here. So, you know, one of the reasons I was very excited to have you on the show is because we talk about defensive scenarios, you know, interacting with law enforcement officers as armed citizens. And we also like having just interesting guests on that can show us, you know, a little bit of insight into what they do within the shooting industry, which, of course, you being a competitive shooter for Team Glock is very impressive, you know, given your background. Can you take us back, and I'm sure you've talked about this before in other interviews, but can you take us back to your days as a law enforcement officer and, you know, what type of training you received and you know, what happened that night?
Sure. I had spent a lot of my time as a total of 20 years in law enforcement. Most of my training time I tried to spend somewhere in the range of firearms and or the defensive tactics side. Sometimes the departments can't have the ability to pay or what they need to put you out there to get the training. So I would go on my own time. And a lot of that consisted of the firearms end. I was fortunate enough to start working with Saber Tactical out of Tennessee at one point in time. I was doing some training with a lot of SWAT courses and stuff that we offered and things of that nature. So I stayed as proficient as I thought I could be. I also started doing a couple of the USPSA shoots around the area, Western Pennsylvania, but I would do it with duty gear. A couple of the other officers that I'd worked with in other departments, we did that and traveled the circuit a little bit around Western Pennsylvania. And I think probably as I got into, probably after about 10 or 12 years is when I really started going real hard into the firearms. And a lot of it was based upon my need with, I started working for the county's office for the narcotics in Washington County, Pennsylvania, and learning how to conceal a firearm so you don't want anybody to know that you have it on, knowing that it's going to pretty much blow the whole case because you're an undercover officer. So that was something that I really got into looking at for my training. And most of the time I was carrying a 5-shot Airlight Titanium Smith & Wesson and with plus P rounds in it. And that's about where I started training with was the revolvers and at the time some of the pocket guns. But overall I carried every day. My training with the police department at the time gave me the opportunity to go through. I was the taser instructor, also with the defensive tactics side. I got to train our department, other officers, and we would work with other departments as well. So my time as a patrol officer and a narcotics officer was with 2 different agencies, sent me in a lot of different directions, and I got to get a lot of great experience, firearms and defensive tactics, on the aspect of, does it work? Yeah, I'm out in the field fighting people. A lot of it does work, and then you find out what doesn't work. So I enjoyed my career as taking some of my vacation time going to other training classes all over the United States. And that's where it kind of kept me going within the department, and the department was nice enough to let me continue doing so. And that kind of took me up to my 18 years where I actually had retired from the department and started searching around. I wanted to go to different departments, and I ended up going to a department part-time where I knew a lot of the officers, and that was the city of Clairton. The city is a former steel town, and I say former in the fact that they still have a functioning steel mill, which is the Clairton Works. But that's about the most, unfortunately, the city has kept going. They've lost that neighborhood status of a nice area because of the loss of jobs when the steel mills went down. It's one of the Ohio Valley, Mon Valley areas that didn't recover after the steel mills left. So it kind of left the community in kind of a lurch. And I got there working under a lot of good officers all the way up until April 4th, 2011.
Would you say that your training that you took it upon yourself to do, would you say that it was more than maybe the department had given you, or like as a typical law enforcement officer, I should say?
Oh, absolutely. The departments, which I find amusing how it kind of segues into what's going on today, the whole defund the police department. Mm-hmm. I don't understand what that's supposed to accomplish because they're already depleted funds as it is. You're running, police departments are the largest financial draw of any area, whether it's a borough, township, city, county. You got to remember, you have employees out there every day, 8 hours a shift, 12 hours a shift, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So with that financial draw, getting a lot of training to a lot of officers is very difficult. And unfortunately, the firearm side of that tends to be the one that does not get a lot of attention. That's why I put my time into it.
So because you're in your bio, it says that you responded to a home invasion. Can you tell us a little bit more about that particular situation? And, I guess we'll kind of segue
Sure.
into how your training prepared you for that.
Sure. I had been working that evening, which turned out it was a Monday evening. in Western Pennsylvania about that time in April. It's still wet, cold, and we had a lot of rain coming in, and it was raining that night. Myself, Matt McDaniel, and John Steiner were my two partners, and we just were out answering calls. And I had started at 8 p.m., and they had been on the road since 4. And we'd answered a couple domestics, just some disturbance calls, and then we got a call that was an unknown disturbance at a residence on Miller Avenue. And when the address came in, it's odd enough that I'd only been there at this department for 3 weeks when this happened. And I'd already known that that house was one that had been looked at for drug activity. So when we started going to the house, each officer, we were in our own cruiser, so we were approaching from different areas, and I happened to be the first on scene. Arrived on scene with the car blacked out so no one could see me. Could see a few lights on at the house, and then my other two partners arrived, and we had discerned that we were going to take a cover point on the house, which I was going to go to the rear door, John was going to the front door, and Matt was covering us from the sides with an AR. As I walked along the side of the house, again, we don't know what type of call this is because we only got a disturbance, and the disturbance call came from the location, which is a duplex. 860 Miller Avenue called about 858 Miller Avenue, and they just said we hear a lot of noises going on that's unlike what should be happening. The time of day was 10:47. The call came in. So as I got the ability to go around the side of the house, I could see inside that there was a lot of movement. So when I went to the back door was probably not more than 4 feet off the ground. So I had 4 steps to go up onto a very small deck. I went onto the deck, and as soon as I saw the door, it was only open about a 1/4 inch. As I went to go to the door, it was slammed shut right in front of me. So I immediately announced myself as Clairton Police, tried to make entry and tried to kick the door, and looked and found out that it was a steel door. And the steel door wasn't really going to go anywhere. So I turned around, went right back down the steps, told Matt and John, hey, let's come back up here onto the deck and see what we can do in gaining entry. Now, again, I didn't know this was a home invasion. Had I known it was a home invasion, we probably would have taken a different action and not tried to make entry or try and get some information from the people that are inside. What I didn't know was John had made a contact very briefly at the front door, and he knew it to be very unusual that a guy answered the door, only opened it a crack and said everything's all right and slammed the door shut. So I didn't know that had occurred, even though I told John, let's come back here. And when I went back up to the deck the second time and went up the steps, as soon as my feet got planted, I have gun out, I am bladed towards the door, I'm right-handed, so the gun's at my chest height at high ready, and it's dark, it's a little rainy, and I didn't highlight myself with a flashlight, and I just wanted to see where I could get into the door. And I didn't know what was coming next, which was they were on the inside, 2 suspects, waiting for me at the door. And they opened the door into the right, and all I saw was a black void, and next thing I saw was a muzzle flash. And that's when it all started. The muzzle flash just immediately puts you into that oh boy moment when you know something's absolutely going wrong. But it was going very slowly. Now, through my training and teachings, I knew that what I was starting to experience was you're going to have the auditory exclusion. Things are slowing down a lot. So what's happening very slowly is actually probably very quickly. As the first shot went off and I saw that muzzle blast, I could hear the second shot or the third shots. I wasn't counting, but I knew they were continually going, and I was wondering why I wasn't firing back. What I found out later on in the hospital was that the first shot actually shot me in my right forearm, traveled down the length of my forearm, and lodged in my elbow, which took my gun away from me. So as I stood there, probably no more than 2 to 3 feet away from the gunman, the shots continued. The first shot hit the arm. The next 2 shots were deflected by my vest that went parallel to my vest, and one struck my radio microphone on my chest. That was later found in the yard, about 15 feet away from me. The fourth shot went into my left chest area to the left of the nipple, right where my vest was. The projectile went into the vest and through the layers of the vest, 1 3/8 in from the seam of the vest, and it did not stop the round. The 5th round struck me in my left armpit. Struck me there because once the 4th bullet went in, it traveled through my left lung, hit a rib, and went down and struck my T11 vertebrae and traversed some part of my spine. That instantaneously paralyzed me, and I was falling to the ground as the 5th shot was fired. So that was kind of the shooting part of it. I fell immediately to my rear. I hit my head on the side of the deck and blew out one of the spindles, but I didn't lose consciousness. And everything is still going very slow to me at this time, but I also could see briefly a silhouette of a person that was now standing over me. And I figured at this point, I don't have my gun, and I thought they were going to end me. Whether it was a shot to the head or what, I didn't know. But they didn't. It ran across me, and they ran down the steps and out through the yard. I don't know if more than one person did or 2 people did, but my partner started to give chase. Here, I didn't know. They thought I was the one doing the shooting, and they were just chasing a suspect. All these things going on at the time, I can talk about them now and give you an idea of where and what was happening, but at the time, my first focus was, after I wasn't shot and the person ran across me, was, okay, I need to get out of here. Something's not right. I actually smacked myself in the leg wondering, what's going on? Why can't I get up? And something told me paralyzed. And it was just that not being able to move your legs and move. And I don't know how to describe it to somebody other than the fact of, you just can't. But I said to myself, what do you need to do? Training kicked in. I started feeling for where I had any wounds. Well, I could feel the amount of blood coming out of the left side of my body, and I knew that this was going to be pretty bad and we needed to get help. When I tried to contact dispatch, obviously I couldn't get my radio to work because I didn't know if I'd lost a microphone. So I was having a really hard time to breathe. I did my best to get a deep breath in and started yelling to my partners, I'm hit, I'm down, I'm hit, not knowing if anybody heard me. And then I just sat there. And again, this is all so very fast, but to me it's so very slow. I started realizing what I was losing, and it was me. I could tell how things got much calmer. I wasn't not out of my mind by any means. What I mean by that is I knew exactly what was going on. I had every bit of knowledge that this was not good, that I had a very good chance of not making it out of this. But I just said to myself right then and there, I said, I'm not going to die on this deck. I'm just not going to die. And as long as I can hear myself talking, I know I'm good. So what I didn't know was that Matt, the partner that was slung with an AR, heard me and was at the end of the yard and turned around and brought his rifle up and took a sight picture on a target, not knowing it was me. That's all he heard was noise, and at the time we were wearing black BDUs as uniforms. So he just saw the person laying on the deck, and then he realized it was me. And then Matt and John came back to the deck. Matt was able to pull me off the deck, slung me over his shoulder as John gave cover, and got me out to the front of the residence, about a house down, waiting for the ambulance. Now at this time, we still don't know if there is anybody inside the residence, so they treated it as, yes, there are people inside, and yes, they needed to get me out of there. Up until this point, I hadn't felt any pain. I just knew that I was shot. I didn't know that I was shot that many times, that 3 bullets had actually struck and gone inside my body. So Matt got me down on the ground, and Matt was also an EMT. He started addressing my wounds, and he said, Jimmy, he says, once he ripped my shirt off, he says, this is going to hurt. And I remember him reaching up and grabbing my chest, and that's when the first amount of pain hit, and I just screamed out. I could hear sirens and everything starting to come around in the background. I could hear John, my partner, and Matt. And then I started hearing other voices, and the rain I could feel just starting to come down and splashing on my face. Then I felt the paramedics and everybody get there. They lifted me up really quickly, got me onto the stretcher, and started putting the stretcher in the ambulance. And I didn't know at the time, but they were preparing to fly me out of there to the trauma unit. from the steel mill. They had a helipad there that was going to be a safe area to pick me up. But the weather prohibited all that because of how bad it was. So the ambulance ride took 17 minutes to the trauma unit at UPMC Mercy, where I actually made it. Made it there to the point where the trauma surgeon spoke to me, and then everything went white. And I didn't know if that was, hey, I get to go upstairs and not downstairs, or the fact that they started to put me in surgery.
Wow.
Yeah, we're coming up on break. Jim, can I have you hang out for one more segment, man?
Absolutely.
All right, folks, we are going to step aside to break. We're going to hear from Concealment Solutions. We'll be right back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by Concealment Solutions. Jason Christensen makes the most comfortable inside the waistband holster on the market, bar none. The Black Mamba. Some of the other products offered are the Sidewinder outside the waistband holster and Python gun belts. Every product that Concealment Solutions makes has unsurpassed craftsmanship that shows in the fit and finish of the product. Visit concealmentsolutions.com to view all of the products available, and you can get 10% off your order when you enter the promo code POLITICS in the promo code box at checkout. That's concealmentsolutions.com.
And we're back. This is the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We're continuing our interview segment with Jim Kuzak. Jim, your story up to now has been an amazing story. We got you to the point where you're in the emergency room and you're starting to white out, and your injuries were obviously life-changing. Was there a point where you knew, hey, I'm going to make it through this? Oh, and I forgot. I'm sorry. Let me pull your... There we go. Now you should be able to talk.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay, good. I didn't know when I started to white out instead of the people who black out. It was, I either say seeing the lights in the hospital or not. I'm not sure. I just was hoping that I would wake up, and I didn't know. I woke up the next day quite early. I guess they said that I was in surgery and intubated till early in the morning, and at one point they had woken me up while I was intubated and wasn't real happy about the tube being in, so they put me back out, and then later in the day I was extubated. And oddly enough, when I did wake up, I had already known I was paralyzed. My mother had been the one to come into the room to tell me that, but I knew when she told me, so it wasn't as a surprise. It's not that I was enjoying the fact that that's what was going to be in my life, but at that point in time, I think it was a matter of just I'm alive. I actually woke up after this, and let's see where we got to go from here. I was obviously heavily sedated and on all kinds of new medications at the time. So the first 10 days was in ICU. And it gets even a little weirder is I wasn't just in ICU. I was hidden under a different name in the burn unit ICU that is a locked unit so that no one knew where I was. Because, again, we don't have shooters at this time. We don't know who actually shot me and if there's a possibility of this not ending yet. So I did have armed guard. Fortunately, I had a large outpouring of the law enforcement community offering to come to the hospital to watch over my room and do details like that. So that worked out very well for that. But no, I didn't know if I was going to live probably until I got out of the ICU.
So what was your journey like to learn to shoot again? Like, was it a natural progression? I mean, everything in your life at this point had changed. Did you know that you'd be able to get back to the range?
No, I had no idea that where anything was going to go, especially actually getting involved back into the shooting sports. Obviously, after having been shot, I did have some issues early on with a little bit of PTSD symptoms. I was immediately sent into counseling, and I did counseling with my fiance now, Chris. She and I went into the counseling just to try and get me the understanding of how I needed to deal with this for the rest of my life, meaning having been shot and the having to deal with the paralysis. So that's kind of where that started. And after about the first year, I was doing at least 3 days a week physical therapy, inside the pool therapy. So I had nothing involving me with firearms, probably until about 2 or 3 years later. I started with my cousin, who's also a police officer. He had taken me to a shooting clay, sporting clays event, and I did that with shotguns. And that's what kind of started me back to shooting guns. And I found that I was able to shoot. I wasn't alarmed by the sounds of gunfire anymore. Loud noises didn't bother me. Whereas the first year, it sends you back, and it really sends you into a different, I don't know, how do I want to say it? When you hear a loud noise or the gunshots and you've had that PTSD kind of feeling, it really puts you out of where your normal idea of living is. And it puts you back into some type of hypervigilance. And it took about a year to get through that. And then I was able to start shooting. I started the shotguns more, and then I started shooting pistols with my cousin again, as like I said, with fellow police officers. And I started looking more into the actual competition side, wondering if I was going to be able to do it from the wheelchair. And that kind of started me looking more towards what I had done in the past. Now, Western Pennsylvania is a little difficult with wheelchairs because it's very hilly and the ranges aren't very accessible, being gravel, mud, and dirt. So probably after about 2 years, I also was able to come into, I have what's called an action track chair, and it's got tank treads on either side. So that was a good start to get me anywhere I needed to go on the range. And then we mounted a holster to it, and I started shooting.
That's awesome. I've seen guys out on the range with the chairs and just the accessibility and how it brings it all back together again.
Yeah, and the greatest thing about it is the shooting sports world just pulled me right in. Once I started meeting a lot of new people and talking to people, it was everything and anything they could do to help me with shooting and how I wanted to continue involving the shooting sports in my life. And I had tried to make contact with people that I had known through distributors and whatnot who I dealt with the firearms in the department and everything. And I just started pushing because I'd carried Glock the majority of my police career. So I wanted to do something with Glock. And I started kind of poking people and talking to everybody I could to try and get out there that this was what my goal was to do. And after about a year, and I think it was 2015 or 2016, I got a call that this might be something that would come about. And the next thing I know, I was hooked up with Ed Fitzgerald out of Glock and been shooting with them ever since.
What do you find the most? Oh,
go ahead.
Well, what do you find the most like enjoyable now? You know, shooting competitively versus, you know, before that happened, or do you not notice a difference? I mean, as far as your mindset, really is what I'm asking.
My mindset, I never really was into the competitive side of it before. It was more duty related. But now I have switched to it being, okay, your goal is to compete. Now, I understand the fact that it being time related as well as accuracy related is that I'm not going to be able to do the time side compared to all the other competitors. So it's more of I want to compete with me every time I shoot to see how much more improved I've gotten and in doing the sport. Whereas all of these new shooting sports have active fault lines, which is a quarter-inch to a half-inch piece of wood that tells you this is where you have to shoot and not shoot. So getting over it in a wheelchair is a whole other thing to do, as to then having to holster, to then having to shoot, and then holster again, and then move your wheelchair again, and then shoot. So it took me a little while to get that, find a way around that and do it. And it's now working pretty good where it's second nature. And I still actively look at the point of, what am I going to do now as a person that's in a wheelchair and paralyzed in the real world if somebody chooses to take advantage of me? So I do carry every day, just like I had before. I've just had to find other ways around where am I going to put a firearm when I'm sitting down all day, and where am I going to be able to kind of hide that away, but where it's accessible. So I'm still in the process of finding the ultimate good way. I still use right now a belly band, and it kind of hides it off to the side, but you can still see a little bit of the imprint. But I also do the whole fanny pack. I hear they're coming back into the fashionable side of it, but not that really mattered to me anyway. But, it just might be a little more acceptable.
Right. That's an amazing story that you have there, Jim, and thanks for sharing it with us. I actually have a client this week that is a paraplegic, and he needs to acquire his firearms license, and it's good to talk to someone that is able to make everything happen. I don't think my client was a gun guy before. He won a gun up at the SIG Academy in New Hampshire, and he needs to get the gun, so he needs to get a gun license here in Massachusetts. So it's nice to hear that you're finding ways to carry. And of course, I hate to ask you how you carry, so everyone knows, but it's nice to hear that you're coming up with some sort of methods that with the belly band and with the fanny pack and stuff. So that's cool.
You said that your client was just at New Hampshire and won a gun?
He was. He went to an event that they had at SIG Academy for, and I never get the right term, so I'm not going to use it, but for people that are paraplegic, but still are interested in...
It was the HAVA event. It was the HAVA event for adaptive shooting.
It was the Adaptive Defensive Shooting Summit, and I was there and shot it.
Oh my God!
I was there and shot it with him.
Oh, cool!
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
It is a small world. So this gentleman won he won a Sky 9mm semi-auto handgun, and he wanted to know what he could do to get it, and all the legal stuff that he's got to do so he can have a license here in Massachusetts. So that's very cool. I'm going to mention to him that I was on with you this week.
Yeah, this was the second year, and it was a fabulous event again. And I owe that to Trevor Backham, who currently shoots for Ruger as a paraplegic in a wheelchair. He was a Black Hawk pilot and was crashed, and he rendered him a paraplegic. And he's kind of who got me really wanting to do this in the shooting sports, because I saw him shooting for Smith & Wesson at the time, and then that started getting me pushing to trying to get to where he was. And now to be on kind of a level where he's at, to see him put that symposium together, it's fabulous. I love it. The second year in a row, I had so much fun going up there.
We've got a comment on... Oh, go ahead, Charlie.
I was just going to say, I've got to write that down. What does HAVA stand for? Because I don't want to screw it up when I say this.
Well, he's talking about the Adaptive Shooting Summit. HAVA is Honored American Veterans in Field, and they do a lot of the same work to get injured vets shooting again.
All right, Adaptive Shooting Summit. That's what I need to write down and remember, because that's not... Well, I'm not going to remember it.
It'll be the Adaptive Defensive Shooting Summit.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have the ASS moniker.
That would not be no, that would not be good.
Hey, Jim, when you're giving out when you're giving out tips, tell me what you use for memory aids, because Charlie really needs some help.
Getting on in my age too, I'm starting to need some memory help as well.
Yeah, we all do.
We're coming up on the end of the segment. We just had a comment come in on social media. This is a bit off topic from what you've been talking about, but I think I'd like to get your take on it, being law enforcement.
Okay.
And Diane says, "Hi, do you think by defunding the police, it's a political tactic, such as if there is no law and order, there will be more gun violence, and politicians want more gun violence because this is a political plan to push element to guns and crush the Second Amendment?"
I've thought a lot about this, and it more or less came out of the incident with the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis. And what scares me about it is I don't think you need to be a scholar to think about the simple fact of it. Taking money away from the police department will no better allow them the ability to improve or act to the reformations that you want to make by taking money away from them. That's just common sense. You should say, yes, if you want to take monies away and you need monies for other programs outside of law enforcement, say that. But don't sit there and say defund the police department because, oh my God, one person in a department was involved in, let's just say, the death of an individual being that not of a police officer, being that of a citizen. Because there's too much going on with George Floyd. I don't like commenting on things. I don't have all the facts. But what I'll tell you is when it goes out from the defunding the police department, it's just a simple statement to the point where it's now going across the board, United States-wise, as a possible action being considered by councils and city managers and mayors. I just don't understand it. I can see changing police departments. I can't see taking money away from them. Now, is it a political move or result to want to get some type of political action or change? I don't know. I just know that it's not the answer and that we've already seen what it is doing in Minneapolis.
Well, we are completely out of time. Jim, I want to thank you so much for taking part of your evening to talk with us tonight, man. And you've got an open invitation. Anytime you've got something you want to share, get in touch. We'll get your book back on the show.
I can't wait for the second time.
All righty. Folks, we do need to step aside to break. We're going to hear from the complete combatant. Then we'll be back with our news segment. And everybody that's been commenting on social media about the news and what's happening in Washington, D.C., we'll be getting to that, and we'll do it right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
Hey, and welcome back. This is a news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Firearms Policy. It has been a month, 2 months. You'd think I'd get that right by now. Presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. We've gotten just a ton of comments coming in about the election tomorrow in Georgia. I think we're going to go ahead and lead the news segment off with that. Also, we got people wanting to know about the Biden transition and all that. Rob, you want to go ahead? You marked yourself as up for the story, for the Georgia story. You want to talk about that one quick, man?
I do. Tomorrow is the day. Georgia residents who haven't already early voted will be going to the polls. They'll cast their vote in the runoff election for the United States Senate. Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are trying to keep the anti-gun candidates, Joel Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, from replacing them and giving the Dems a chance to ram the Biden-Harris anti-gun agenda through. If any of our viewers in Georgia have not yet voted, please get there tomorrow, do your duty, and bring a friend.
Lots of friends that are already registered to vote.
What I noticed about that election, what I noticed about that was some just shocking testimony in front of the Georgia Senate Judiciary Committee, where an expert on document verification said, I can tell you if these documents were forged. I can tell you if they were sent through the mail. A lot of them weren't. They were pre-printed. I can tell you how many. And one of my colleagues has already hacked into the voting machines for the early voting. If you will recall, the president of Dominion Voting Systems said that his equipment was not connected to the internet, that there was no way to hack into it. And here we have someone calling the president of that company a liar. Either the man's a fool, a liar, or lied in front of Congress and should go to jail for fraud. Anyone have a comment that they would like to add?
Well, yes. The election tomorrow is critical. And just like the election back in November, there's going to be cheating going on. Let's be adults about this. Let's be realists about this. There's going to be cheating going on. And we need to beat the other side by more than the level of the cheat. That's the best way I can put it. We've got to hit a absolute grand slam to score one run.
Paul, my concern is that they can cheat more than you can vote. That's shocking for me to say. It's embarrassing for me to say. It's painful, but I fear that it's true. So yes, we need to vote, and then we need to watch the vote being counted and sit there with our friends and neighbors and do the math. Be the poll watchers, and no, you're not going to shut it down. Show me the chain of custody. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
but how do I put this? No matter how much we try, I'm just being a realist here. No matter
Right.
how much we try, there's going to be some. I'm just saying right now, today and tomorrow, we need to get our maximum effort out.
Right.
And
True
that's the only thing that is worth anything at this point is getting the maximum effort out. I want to get in one social media comment from quite a while. Actually, when we very first started the interview segment, this came across and has been absolutely lighting up the chat room. Mike Shaw said, "How bad are we screwed if Biden/Harris comes around collecting guns?" I want to set everybody a little bit at ease right now. That's not going to happen right away. It's going to take a while for gun control of any type to come up as legislation. He could start weaponizing the ATF. That he can do with executive actions. However, just as we've seen just a couple weeks ago, he may be able to weaponize the ATF, but remember back at Sandy Hook, we can weaponize Congress. They've got a slim lead in the House. They've got, if they have a lead at all, it's a tie in the Senate. And we've got senators and every member of the House that is coming back up for re-election in 2 years. One thing I'll tell you is, the one thing a politician wants is to get re-elected. And we all need to be starting making it very clear that if you want to be re-elected, you need to start fighting for our gun rights. There's enough Democrats that are not on the extreme left side that I think we can come through this unscathed. It's going to be a fight. It is not going to be easy. But I think we can still win this.
Paul, a number of attorney generals are already looking at legal challenges to unconstitutional orders and say, you can write an executive order all you want. It's not constitutional. I'm not going to enforce it. Don't bring it here or you'll get into a pretty, there will be guys with guns on both sides.
Right. Let me go ahead and bring this in. We just had Dana, our for anybody who isn't very familiar with the show, Dana is the guy that writes our news segment for us. He says Georgia GOP had a huge poll watcher push. Cheating tactics have been exposed, and like I said, that's no shock. I mean, we know the cheating tactics are out there. Like I said, we've just got to overcome them.
Paul, do you remember the comments from James O'Keefe? He said, everybody has a cell phone. We are all citizen journalists. If you see something you don't like, photograph it. Take a video of it, even better. And then spread the news far and wide. This is what I saw, where I saw, I'll verify it. This looks like fraud to me. Because we're going to have to outshout the mainstream media, and we can. What do you think, Charlie?
I really hope so. My biggest concern with this election back in November, not just the one tomorrow, is that the folks on the right believe that the left cheated, and the left they're not denying it necessarily. Like I don't think they're just full of crap. I don't think we can ever, if they get away with this, that we're never going to be able to have a fair election again. And that is one of my biggest concerns, that if fighting back doesn't mean anything, and if they're going to count all of the fraudulent and the fake ballots, then what's the sense in ever voting again, ever?
Oh, I think I know. I think every college Republican group has a how to hack the vote, you know. If they want to hack it by 100,000, we'll hack it by 100 million. Then they'll start caring.
Then they'll start caring because we cheated more than they did.
I'll see your tractor trailer full of votes and match it with my 2. I know guys who drive tractor trailers.
You know, with the current news, the breaking news today was that Trump audio file, and you know, it's being reported that he is wanting, you know, Georgia Secretary of State to recalculate the votes in his favor, and that's actually not what he said. Because I listened to the recordings that were released, and what I noticed was that certain news channels were taking some of what he said and then creating the story that, oh, Trump is wanting, is pushing for this recalculation in his favor. What he actually is saying is no, I just want to make sure the votes are being counted fairly and that everything is legal. Time to actually report on what that phone conversation was. It was voicing the concerns that we're voicing now. Was it a fair election? Are all the votes legal? And I think that the fact that the media has so much power that, you know, and control over what the public thinks and knows, that's the scary part, is that the media itself is creating whatever narrative. I don't even trust the news anymore.
Thank goodness people listen to you, Amy. Amy, you're the answer to that. No, just smile big, but don't laugh, because you took the time to read it, to listen to the entire interview, and you said, this headline's baloney. Mm-hmm. A lot of people didn't, and you're trusted amongst your friends. So your social media post, hey, the media lied about this. I listened to the interview. That's powerful.
Amen. And I think she froze up on us.
I know, she was overwhelmed. Oh, there she is. I overwhelmed at Marine Drill Sergeant. Oh my God.
We've got about a minute left in the news. The news segment. Anything else that is absolutely pressing that we need to cover?
I like that somebody finally went on the offensive in Florida. A representative filed a bill to make Florida a constitutional carry state. Their state Senate has killed this a number of years in a row. They've been bought by Bloomberg. But I think we have to file bills like this to make the paid-off politicians pay a price for pandering. I dare anybody else to write it like that.
I didn't anyone to say it. All those P words at the same time? Holy moly. Pay the price for pandering.
Yes! Preposterous.
Spoken like a plosive professional. Yes, okay. On to...
I want to bring up real quick, it's not in the notes, but I did do some research on it. Another state is teeter-tottering on becoming constitutional carry, and excuse me, and that's Utah. Utah has a bill that would bring permitless constitutional carry to the B state, and we'll see. They have a little bit of a rhino for a governor there in Utah, and we'll see if he signs it. But it looks like it's going to make its way through the legislature. So
that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and do this. We're going to step aside to break, and we're going to hear from Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. When we come back, we're going to be doing our DGU segment, and we'll get to that right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
And welcome back to the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions, and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. I want to say before I toss to Rob, folks, out on social media, if you want to chime in on these, go ahead and type your comment in as the stories are coming through. You can be part of the discussion of the DGUs as they happen too. I'll get your comment on the screen. We'll discuss it. Rob, take us to Missouri, man.
Wentzville, Missouri in particular, 7:30 on a Saturday morning, a female driver parked her car in a parking lot and was preparing to get out of her vehicle. As she's sitting there, she notices, good situational awareness on her part, 4 people coming toward her between the cars. A teenage boy approaches her vehicle and pointed a gun at her through the window. He demanded that she turn over her keys. The woman was armed. She took out her own firearm and refused to leave the vehicle. She pointed it at her attacker, and that's when the carjacker and his 3 accomplices ran away. Police got descriptions. The officers arrested a 17-year-old, 2 15-year-olds, and an 11-year-old for the crime. One of the 15-year-olds had a firearm. He's being charged with aggravated robbery, while the other 3 were charged with conspiracy to commit robbery. Wow. Remember, the crime you get may not be the one you plan. Could you pull the trigger on a 15-year-old?
Well, not only that, one of them was 11 years old. What if the 11-year-old was the one
had the gun
carrying the firearm? Yeah.
By the way, when I followed the link, these kids had been drinking at 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And this was not their first victim. They were on a spree.
One comment coming in from Dana says, this one is another DGU with no shots fired. Good one. I want to bring up one other point, and that is when you park your car, do you park it in a way so that should something happen, you can hit the throttle and get out of there? Do you back your car into a parking spot? Or in a situation like several Walmarts, do you find a spot where you can pull through and be in an exit lane rather than having to back your car out into the lane to get out? When you're at home, do you back your car into the driveway or something to that effect into your garage maybe, so that if something happens, all you got to do is hit drive and hit the throttle. You don't have to back out. A little bit of planning can give you a great escape route.
I think Bruce Wayne planned things really well, because you could drive the Batmobile in and the floor would spin around so it faced out.
I don't have that kind of money myself. Yeah, I don't have Bruce Wayne money. So,
but what great presence of mind, because you've said it before. You're in a 2,000-pound defensive box, compact car. I don't know, and you're not getting out of it. Here, you want to get me out of here? You come get me.
Right. And I've said it a lot. And by the way, I'm just saying this publicly, and I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but I got a lead on somebody that I'm going to be, I hope, bringing onto the show sometime in February or March. Somebody that operates a defensive driving, as in self-defense driving academy. And
Fun.
I'm really hoping to get that person on the show in the near future. But right now we're booked all the way out through the end of January. We've got bookings in February already. So if this person is able to make it on the show, it'll be in late February or March. But anyway, Charlie, you were going to say something?
Yes. What I think is interesting is we have a 17-year-old, a 15, and an 11-year-old that have a gun. It's probably safe to assume it's a handgun.
Yes. Probably.
The anti-gun folks want us all to when they hear stories like this, to say we need to make it difficult for kids to get guns. A 17-year-old shouldn't be able to get a gun. An 11-year-old shouldn't be able to get a gun. And their 11-year-old is not going to a gun store to buy a handgun, because that's federally illegal for them to do. So how do they get these guns? They get them through nefarious ways. They steal their parents' guns. Maybe the parents aren't keeping them locked up. I always point this out whenever there's someone under 18 years old or even 21 years old that's committing a crime with a gun. People don't get these, an 11-year-old can't even buy cigarettes, for goodness sakes. He's not going to go buy a handgun someplace. Legally, of course.
One comment, and we're going to throw to you for the next story here in just a second here, Charlie, but Robert Wagner says, living and driving in New Jersey makes us defensive driving experts. Having driven in New Jersey, I'm not going to argue that too much, but calling yourself a defensive driving expert without training is like calling yourself an handgun expert without training. You might be okay, you might even be pretty good, but you can get better. Charlie, let's go ahead, Charlie, if you would. What's our next DGU?
All right, our next DGU comes to us from Port Arthur, Texas. On a Sunday night, 3 people broke into a home and held the family at gunpoint. This happened right after a woman who lived there arrived at home. It is believed that the homeowner and the 3 suspects were acquainted. The 29-year-old homeowner heard the commotion and came from another room with a rifle to protect his young children. He fired several shots at one of the intruders. The intruder who was shot died, and his 2 compatriots fled the area prior to the police arriving at the scene. What I think is interesting about this story is we've got a link connecting. We've got a link connecting this story to another story where the very next night the house was set on fire and no one was home.
Wow.
I think the lesson to learn from this is you should probably listen to your parents when they say you shouldn't hang out with those people. If somebody's breaking in your house while you're there and you've got a gun to protect yourself, which is great, and then the next night they come over and burn your house, you probably want to hang out with some new people and try to disassociate yourself with them.
You think?
Right?
Make new friends.
Rob,
yes.
Rob, I think you had a comment on this one, right?
Well, I hear gang and drugs being involved here. What also I want our listeners to notice, these 4 gang members came in and pointed guns at a 5-year-old kid. And they said, give me what you got. They threatened their kids. They deserve to be shot. What's interesting, of course, is, all right, how does one-armed person beat four-armed people? Imagine your wife comes home, she walks into the house, the kids go, Mom, run to her, gang members pile in behind them and behind her and point guns at them. I'm wondering if these four guys weren't shot from behind, at which point I'm going, good, keep shooting.
Well, let me do a lawyer on you, and
okay,
because we're connected with the SAF, and because my name's on the show, when the bad guy is turning away, it is time to stop shooting. Okay.
No, when the threat is gone, it's time to stop shooting.
Okay. Yes.
If he's still facing my family and threatening them,
then yeah, game
okay.
on.
I take. You're absolutely right. When he's headed out the door, do not chase the bad guy. How to turn a good shoot into a bad one? Right. You win.
Right.
What strikes me about this story is how they broke in right after she arrived home, which makes me wonder, did they follow her from someplace? Was there a reason why they chose that house? I didn't read the specifics about it, but we do hear a lot of stories where people are followed from gun ranges, they're followed from gun stores, they're followed from banks. It just really makes you have to have good situational awareness on your entire route home, so that when you're walking in your home, you know that no one's with you.
You know, I was driving this past week, and I hate that. I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, Rob. I followed someone, and I followed them from one road onto another road, and we were both going to turn into a parking lot to go to Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to be that creepy guy. I'm going to keep going. I'll go somewhere else. I'll be fine without, a coffee and a croissant. You know what I mean? But I didn't. I was thinking, if I was in that car, I would notice that I'm following them. I'm following them on this road. I took this turn. I took this turn. And now we're going into the same place. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm just going to chalk it up and go someplace else.
I've done that myself. I really have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've changed my direction when I notice someone following me, especially if I'm coming home. If I see that the same car has been following me, I'll continue going. I'll go somewhere else just so they don't know where I'm going.
Right. Yeah, my rule of thumb is if you follow me for 2 turns, I'm going to go really random on you. And if they follow me after 3 and 4, I'm going to start getting aggressive about it. One more social media comment. I think this is connected to the one we did a little bit ago. Robert Wagner. Robert, thanks for commenting so much, man. You're making my job easy. Robert says you stop shooting after the threat has been neutralized. And that's true if you've already started engaging. My whole point, what I want to make sure is that the threat is... It's really easy because I can say all I want. You got a keyboard and 250 characters. The threat running away after the fact, the threat is neutralized if they're retreating. That's my whole point. So, anything more we want to cover in DGUs? I think we got it all. Everybody, thanks for commenting on these. I really, you folks make my job a whole lot easier when you do my job for me. So thanks, man. I appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and step aside to our last break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about who's been writing what, and we'll shut the show down. We're going to hear from Jews for the Preservation for Firearms Ownership again. We'll be right back after that.
It all failed before. Alcohol prohibition brought us organized crime, and no less alcohol. Drug prohibition brought us murderous, no-knock, wrong-house raids.
Police! Search warrant!
No, wait! The crack house is next door!
Now gun prohibitionists want laws to lead us down that same path. Don't Americans ever learn? Just ask yourself, isn't government the only beneficiary of police-state policies? Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership. Information available at jpfo.org.
And welcome back to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Normally at this point we used to, and I think we're even going to put this part of the show to bed after we said it now for so many times. The old email address for writing the show has been put to bed, so I'm not even going to mention it anymore. My personal email address is paul@politicsandguns.com if you want to get a hold of me about something. But if you want to comment about something and have it make it to the show, please join us live, either on YouTube or on Facebook, Monday evenings at 5 p.m. Central Time, the only time zone that really counts. And come join us, comment as we're live. We'll get your comments on the air. Rob, what's been going on over at Slowfax, man?
Judges told us that we have to have absentee ballots so that everyone could vote. Judges said that showing a picture ID infringed on the right to vote. The very steps that judges took to have a perfect election instead gave us a result that was worse, far worse than any theoretical disenfranchisement. In pursuit of perfect democracy, judges were willing to ignore the fact that voter fraud robs everyone of their vote. The only question is if you and I will see it as fraud, recognize it as fraud, and do something about it. Democracy dies when we kill it to get our way. That article is called, "It's Easy to Steal an Election, but Impossible to Hide the Theft." That's at my blog, slowfax.wordpress.com.
John, normally Rob would say, "Hey, John, what are you writing about at Only Guns and Money?" But as you can see, yeah, John's not here.
John.
So I'm going to recommend you go ahead and go over to his blog, onlygunsandmoney.com. Read what he's been doing. He may even be watching. He's just getting back from vacation. Just got back this evening. Couldn't be back in time to be on the air. So,
hey, Paul, what have you been writing about?
Boy, there's been a couple that didn't even make it. I kind of find the smaller stories that interest me to write about over at the Gun Mag. One that I had last week, the New York City Police Department had a year-end press conference. And it turns out that what they're figuring out, but the police department at least, the chief of police and the chief of detectives had a news conference and said, look, we're making gun arrests at record numbers. It's doing nothing. What we figured out is if we go after the people that are being violent and locking them up, it's making a difference. So that's the direction we're going to go. Now, and that's great. It's encouraging news. However, that's the police department. That's not the DA's office. That's not judges. That's not, there's a lot of things it's not, but it's a great first step. I wouldn't expect things to turn around in New York overnight, but putting violent people behind bars, I think it's really going to help. Let's see. Amy, Robin, you guys written anything you want to talk about?
I just wrote.
Robin,
go ahead, Amy.
You go first. Robin
I'll go first.
Yeah,
Okay, so I just wrote our end of the year recap for A Girl and a Gun. I went back through our metrics and had a quick peek at 2020, and I was excited to see that we had nearly 2,000 training events, and it was over 19,000 women that came to our events in 2020. I know. So what pandemic, right? So that was really exciting to have that kind of participation in a year with so many challenges. So it was really cool to look back and write our notes and see how much we've given back to different communities through our charitable programs and our law enforcement support and just all the training and competing we've done. So that's online at agirlandagun.org.
Well, and I think that shows just how I was just commenting about Robin. I think that shows how much firearms education and training really is needed, especially with the new gun owners out there.
All right.
But I recently wrote it's an article about how interior design is now affecting indoor shooting ranges, and so you'll be able to find that at Shooting Industry Mag. I think next month, though.
All right. One more comment I want to get in off of social media before we go ahead and shut the show down, and we're going to actually be pretty much on time, believe it or not, shutting the show down. Maybe even a little early. Honcho Fett, and by the way, what a name. That's an awesome name from YouTube. Says, anyone going to the Florida Firearms Industry Range Expo, January 22nd to 24th in Immokalee, Florida. And I hope I got the name of that town right, but I am not. That would have been SHOT Show week. And when SHOT Show went away, I mean, yeah, everybody just kind of, there were two schools of thought. First school of thought was, oh God, thank goodness I don't have to go to that thing again. And the other one was, oh shucks, what are my 6 blog readers going to think when I don't show up for SHOT Show? Those are the two schools of thought that happened there. I didn't even know this was happening, so I'm not going to be there. What I am going to be, though, and Rob, I know you're going to be there. Charlie, I think you might be there. Amy, I know, is going to be there. Is in mid-March. They're going to be, Florida Carry is having their camping event and speaker event, and at least the 3 of us are going to be there.
I'm definitely going to be there as well.
Very cool. Now, are you going to be tent camping, Charlie, or are you going to be doing like me and roughing it equals a hotel without room service?
I'm going to be roughing it with Dr. John Dean at a hotel.
Okay.
I think what did it for me was when I went to the camping event a couple years ago. I'm up here in New England. I've been here for a long time. It gets really cold. But when Kevin Sona said it gets cold in Florida, I'm like, ah. So I'm sleeping in a tent. I'm sleeping in a tent with every piece of clothing I brought with me while I'm wearing it, and I'm freezing my tail off. The second night, I decided to put a space heater in the tent, which they said you shouldn't do, but I was willing to take that risk.
You know, I was asked to speak there. I was their lead speaker last year, and I drove, at the point I was still driving truck, I drove the big truck down there. I got a load going down to Central Florida. I got my boss at the time to give me permission to go ahead and drive to a truck stop 30 miles from where I dropped and park for the weekend and get a load out on Monday. And that did cost him some money, but he wanted to make sure I was able to do what I wanted to do. And so while everybody is there, it got down into the middle 30s, and I just went back to my truck at night where I had this nice heater that I come out in the morning and I'm in my light jacket and I'm, hey, how's it going, guys? It's great sleeping weather last night, wasn't it? This is nothing for South Dakota. Meanwhile, it was 68 degrees in the truck all night long.
And Rick Ector's there looking like the abominable snowman going, man, I didn't know I owned all these clothes. It's like Detroit out here. Yeah, sure it is, Rick.
All right. Well, folks, that is going to do it for this episode of the Polite Society podcast. Want to remind you real quick, if you're of a mind and you belong to Facebook, please, and believe me, if you're a member of Facebook, you probably belong to it. Please head over to Facebook group named Polite Society Podcast Listeners. It's a regulated group. We don't let you got to be a listener to be in there, so you don't get any anti-gun rhetoric going on in there. It's just a bunch of people that listen to the show, that hang out and have a good time. Lots of great topics that come on there. Just search Facebook for Polite Society Podcast Listeners. That does wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. I'd like to thank Jim Kuzak for joining us today. So for Amy, Dana, Tracy, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, and Rob.
Until the next time.
Stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, we are clear of recording. I'm going to go ahead and shut the stream down. Everybody who's been watching, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Most especially, thank you for commenting. I was only able to get a few comments up tonight because there were so many going through, but thank you, thank you, thank you. It really makes this job fun. Anybody on the air could tell you, as I came on the air tonight, as I came in to set the show up, I told everybody, I've got no energy. I'm beat. I cannot do the show tonight. You guys all need to lead. By the time the show was about 5 minutes in, with all the comments, my energy came back. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and shut the feed down. Everybody, have a great week. Come join us Wednesday night for the Arms Society and Friday for the Weekly Bullet.